It almost seems a little funny. I didn't even realize, in some ways, the connection to the announcements to the gospel until I read it out loud. Sometimes when you look at something, you go in a totally different direction. But because I don't usually read the announcements in my office before I read the gospel, it's kind of funny. It's almost as though God himself has a problem with us. If he got up and made the announcements, it wouldn't be different than saying, why have only 18% given to the BAA? Why do so few sign up for adoration? Why do so few come to the banquet? Imagine that for a minute. Now, this is not ultimately to say, now I want you to get on the BAA or anything else like that. This is really a focus on heavenly realities, and that's what's most important here. But what it shows is there's a consistency across the board. That's the trouble with our human personality. There's a consistency in it, even in our neglects. You know, for instance, if a person is messy, you're not going to usually find one room in the house where they keep it nice. Usually a messy kitchen, a messy dining room, messy living room, messy bedroom. And in the same way, if you see one room meticulous, you can almost guess that the rest are going to look pretty nice. Unless several people live there and you have a teenager. Now, when it comes to order or disorder, responsibility or irresponsibility, there's a pretty consistent path in our lives. For the most part, we are either good at that or bad at that, or we're at a certain level of it. Whatever that level may be, that's where we live. But do you hear God speaking to the stubbornness of your heart and mind? Because we are certainly not the converted. If we were the 100% converted, everyone would probably say amen at the end of every sentence as the truths of God are proclaimed. We would wear out the fabric of our clothes at the mea culpa. That's one of the beautiful things, by the way, to see a vestment. It's actually worn out right here. But I tell you, my friends, it took 50, 60, 70 years to do that, and more than one priest. Our hearts remain in many ways unconverted, even on the simple level of supporting each other as we have to do, to the profound level of working out our salvation. God knows the stubbornness of our hearts, and that's why this whole parable was created. If you look at the parables of Christ, and someday I would love for some good Catholic psychologist to look at them and say, what in this parable reflects something defective in the human personality? And it might be interesting that we would find that every parable reflects something very serious about us by way of a character defect. Sometimes, if nothing else, just that slowness to respond, even in the face of goodness, even in the face of the great, whatever you want to call it, invitation. It's amazing sometimes that people will neglect things that they know are coming. For instance, one of the basic human things in our fallen human nature is a love of money. And yet, even the love of money is not enough to motivate people to file their taxes on time to get the refund. Even there, we're not even working in our own best interest. So if we can't even be motivated on our basis level to sometimes do what's right and good, do you see why Christ himself gives us a parable that shows us the stubbornness of our hearts? It reveals to us, especially because the season of Pentecost that we now begin with the Sundays after the Feast of Pentecost, the very first parable the church presents to us is one that holds up to us a mirror. Now sometimes, but rarely, we look in the mirror and we're just happy with everything we see. But most times when we look in the mirror, even at least ritually, we'll do something to make sure that we look just right. Although the improvements are negligible and often go unappreciated. Nobody ever goes up to you and goes, you know what? Your left eyebrow has never looked better. But don't we do silly things like that? Oh, okay. Now that you've done those little ritual touches. But the mirror that's held up to us says how slow you are to respond to the things of God. Now, sometimes when we look in the mirror and we're frightened by what we see, we quickly turn away. And maybe we do that too. The parable here shows a great banquet prepared and pathetic excuses being given not to come. I one time saw a pathetic excuse that I thought was hurtful and crushing. At a wedding, we had a beautiful rehearsal. Everyone was very excited. Everyone went home. They came back to church the next day, and the bride was in tears. I'm thinking, oh heavens, please don't tell me the husband called it off. They seemed like a nice couple, a nice guy. That wasn't it at all. Her maid of honor, the girl chosen to stand at her side and witness her vows officially, had been offered 2 tickets to the OSU Michigan game. Can you put her in this parable? I've got a team of yoke and oxen. I've got to test them. I've just gotten married. I've got this. I've got things to look after. I bought a piece of land. I got 2 tickets to the game. And indeed, what an emptiness and what a sadness there is in that. And we can look at all those and think, who would ever do such a thing? Somebody might even thinking I was in a wedding and I could have gone to something, but I knew my responsibility. I went to the wedding. Here's your star. How many times have we failed in something far greater? And that would be, my friends, our duties to God. In the Mass, right before I lift the precious blood to drink it, the prayer that I say is this. We say it in unison. What shall I render to the Lord for all he has rendered unto me? I will take the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. So, my friends, the question is to us, what shall I render to God for all he has rendered me? The first thing we must render to God is our basic worship and adoration. That is an obligation we have. We have an obligation, my friends, just because of human decency, that when someone does anything for us at any level of kindness, it does require some response. A thank you, a prayer, some expression of gratitude. We are not royalty, and even royalty when walking through a door should thank the person holding it. But whenever a kindness is done our way, an expression of thanks is proper. And not to do so reveals a want of character, a want of personal formation, a want of decency. But for the most part, we're decent at the little tiny thank yous of the day. If anything, maybe a little overdone sometimes. But when it comes to the greater things, how shall we say thank you to God for the gift of life? How shall we say thank you to God for the gift of salvation? How will we say thank you to God for the gift of the Eucharist? Those things are seemingly beyond the reach of a thank you that's equal. What thank you can there be? Can you write a note to God and say thank you for the sacred body and blood of your Son? The thank you, my friends, is in the act of receiving, and receiving with a grateful heart. That itself becomes the thank you. To pray at Mass well becomes the thank you. To sing at Mass becomes the thank you. I hope the creed today will sound louder today just because of that reminder that we will all lift our voices and